name is Catherine. Welcome to this mini workshop on props. So if you're new to yoga and you've seen or heard or see pictures of different yoga props and have wondered what they're all about, I'm going to cover what I have here and explain what they're used for. I get a lot of questions what do we need, what are they optional, or what are they used for, etc. So that's why I'm going to cover all the different possibilities. So I would start with the yoga mat. If you don't already have one, you'll see there are various mat thicknesses that you can buy. There's 2, 4, and 6 millimeter usually. The thicker the mat, the more durable it is, and usually it's a little more sticky depending on if you want to do sticky would be for hot yoga, or if you're in a really humid environment, it prevents slipping on the mat. But you have thinner mats. This is an example of another one. I have also a very, very thin, light one in my car for travel. So because these are much more light and easier to carry, these rolled up are very heavy. So you have a few options there. The next most common yoga prop are yoga blocks. So I highly recommend these. I use them all the time. You have two types of yoga block. So these are cork blocks and these are foam blocks. So each one has its own use. So these are heavier but more sturdy, and these are lighter and softer. So, but I use both depending on what we're doing, what type of mobility work we're doing. So highly recommend. If you do decide to purchase yoga blocks, I suggest you get 2, because a lot of the work that I do is it's for different types of floor work or reaching the floor. So since we have 2 arms, what the blocks do is bring the floor closer to us. So I'll do a quick demo just so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. So forward fold. I'm in forward fold, and this is all individual base. So we have different arm lengths or different tightness in the back of your legs, depending on what you've been doing that day or that week. So if the floor is not reachable, we just bring the floor to us, and you have different levels for the blocks. So this is the lowest level, medium, high. So you pick, depending on the day, which one works better. So that's what the blocks are used for. And there's many, many, many poses that we use those to bring the floor closer. The next yoga prop that I would go over is the half one, half cylinder. Same thing. This just brings the different shape to the floor. So if you're standing or sitting doing footwork, you can use that block for support. This one is optional. If you see them, that's what it is, and that's just one idea of what you can do with that. The next one is yoga strap. So we use this quite a bit as well. There's various lengths of straps that you can buy. They're usually between 5 and I think 6 feet is the longest one that you can get. Has a buckle at the end, so you can put it into loops if you want, depending on the different poses that we're doing. Also, don't have to buy this. You can use a belt or any type of strap, anything you have around the house that would simulate this, you can use that as well. So that's the yoga strap. We have elastic bands. You would want an elastic band that's not the loop. or you can use the loops as well. There's elastic loops for different work. These ones are simulate the belt as well. The only difference is the belt doesn't stretch. Sometimes you want it to, depending on the work that we're doing. Sometimes you don't. So if we want to do strength work with the bands, then you would want the stretch. When you buy these elastic bands, you'll see there's different colors, and the different colors represent different thicknesses. So the thicker the elastic, the tougher it is to stretch. So that simulates adding weight to your strength work. Next, we use blankets. Blankets are very common in yoga classes. You can use them for many, many different things. You can, with a blanket, you can fold it to make it thicker, and you can sit on the blanket if you want to raise your sitting position like I'm doing. I'm sitting on a bolster right now, which I will explain in a minute why we do that. We also use blankets. At the end of a yoga class is Shavasana, or final resting pose. So depending on the class or the goal of the class, or even if the class ends and you want to stay in the final resting pose, you could be in for 5 minutes or 20 minutes or as long as you want. So if it's been a particularly active class and you've built a lot of heat, and when you cool down, a lot of people like to cover up completely when they're lying on their mat in Shavasana just to keep warm. So the blanket also, I'm going to just move these out of the way here. We also use the blanket and I will demo this on my mat. So I've spread out the blanket to cover from one side of the other to my mat. So if you have sensitive knees, placing that cushion, say we're in tabletop pose, now I have that cushion under my knees, and it makes the floor work a little more comfortable. And that also touches on why you would have various thickness of mats as well. So that provides more cushion, depending on what type of floor you're on. If you want more cushion underneath your knees, you can get a thicker mat. So bolsters, as you can see, I just put it back, the bolster that I'm sitting on. You can buy a bolster. This is what it looks like. There's all different kinds of shapes. There's round ones. This one's more in the heart shape. There's square ones. There's rectangular ones. There's giant bolsters, all different shapes and sizes. Different shapes and sizes and different thickness. So these are used a lot in restorative classes or restorative poses that are integrated into more active classes. But what they do is they support you in a pose that you're going to be in for a longer period of time. So I'm sitting on a bolster, and what that does is, so if I was sitting on the floor directly, and if you find your knees are quite high, then that's what we use the bolster for, to raise the hips up higher, and that helps the knees and hips relax. So your knees don't have to touch the floor when you're sitting cross-legged, but you just want your knee level to be lower than your hip level, the hip bones. It's tough to sit for long periods of times with your knees high because everything is tight, everything is working. So the more you can relax your legs and relax your knees, the longer you can sit. So if you have a meditation practice or if you're just starting one, this helps sit for longer periods of time. Once the hip flexors and your hips have the chance to relax, and now the shoulders are stacked over hips, it just makes it much more comfortable to sit for longer periods of time. So you don't have to use a bolster. You can stack blankets. Some people sit on blocks, or you have the longer bolsters. Whatever you have, it will work. It's totally fine. So speaking of bolsters, like I said, there's a large variety that are on the market. They can be quite pricey depending on the size of bolsters, but you can also make your own. So I have done, just to show that this is one that I have that's more like in a tube shape. So what I did was I took just a regular bed pillow, folded it lengthwise, and then I sewed the two edges together, and then just covered it up with a pillowcase. So that's a different size bolster that I can use for various poses. So you can do that. It's a cheaper way to make your own bolsters, and you can make them as large or whatever shape you want. You can also take two pillows, put them together and sew together the four edges, and you have a much larger bolster. You can use couch cushions, pillows that you have around the house, body pillows, anything like that is great and will help in a restorative yoga class. The next thing we have are spongy balls. So this is just a smaller version of the large ones that you've seen that people sit on at work or in mobility classes or different cardio classes. You can sit on the balls and do different strength work. So this is a smaller version. We use this to support the body in various poses as well. So also if you want to sit in meditation, you can also, if I had two of them, you could place one under each knee to help hold you in this pose. So now the body relaxes even further. So it just makes it that much more comfortable. So these are very useful as well. Then we have therapy balls. There's two in this one. So this you could use lying on the floor, placing these two on either side of your spine, rolling up and down. So that would massage out the fascia and connective tissue and muscle that's running up alongside the spine on either side or the neck. There's a huge amount of body work that you can do with the therapy balls. So these ones are blue. They're more dense than the purple ones. This is just the colors that I have, but you'll see on the market there's different colors, but what they do is they just represent different densities. So this one is much more spongy and softer depending on what you want to do. So an example of work that we do is to roll out the feet. There's many different exercises you can do to get into all of the muscles and joints of the feet. There'll be another workshop on that because I'm a big foot nerd, and foot mobility and getting into working the feet is so beneficial. So we do a lot of this in different classes that I do. So you don't have to buy these. You can also use tennis balls, you can use lacrosse balls, but just know that there's different softness that you want if you want to have a variety, because depending on what you're doing, what type of therapy work you are doing on the body, there's some areas that are very sensitive, so you wouldn't want to start with the more dense ones and just start with the softer one and work up to the different ones. So, oops, those are the therapy balls. Last is sandbags. Totally optional, but just if you ever see them, just know that we do use sandbags from time to time in more restorative or yin poses, which are poses that we do. A lot is floor-based work where we get into poses for longer periods of time. So it could be anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes in a pose, but not holding a pose. It's more relaxing into a pose where you use different blocks and bolsters to hold you. And so you can relax into that pose, but then we add a little bit of weight through the sandbag. On the belly, for example, is one way to use the sandbag, which can be very grounding and supportive to have a little bit of weight on the stomach while you're lying on the floor. Or you can rest the sandbags on your hips when you're in different twists, etc. Can feel quite nice to have that little bit of additional weight on the joints. So I think I've covered just about everything. Again, just to give you an idea of different things that we use, in all of the classes that I do host and put on the website, I'll put on the bottom suggested or recommended props for each class. So you know, just to give you an idea of different things that we'll be doing in the class. They are recommendations only, and you can absolutely do the classes without the props. But just know if they're in there that this is what they are and this is what they're used for. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you soon.